This is a company that does floating LNG, effectively vessels. This is a company that the founder, chairman, was very excited by the design and what they were building here, and probably got a little too excited early on in sharing the narrative and the investment case. And I think the market started to over extrapolate growth if we look back 3, 4, 5 years and where the stock was. He probably guided a bit aggressively in terms of where the company would be in terms of floating LNG vessels and the number they would have by 2020 or 2022 or 2024. And I think that's part of what creates the opportunity is people were fatigued, they were waiting. There was obviously a lot of fatigue in sort of small, mid cap, special situations. And so we're now at a point where the company has effectively two LNG, FLNG vessels out at sea, moored, actually extracting gas. And and there are likely 2 to 3 more that are coming, or I should say 2 more that are coming. And I think that's what creates the super exciting kind of toll road, free cash flow story going forward. And I think the original investor fatigue and this idea of, we will believe it when we see it is why the stock hasn't really moved up the way it should, have so far, the way it should have so far, based on what's actually coming to fruition in terms of these FLNG vessels. And aside from that, when I originally sort of started researching and investing in Golar, I was looking for interesting LNG plays just because of what we're seeing in terms of the market dynamic. I mean, we look at LNG as really this transition fuel, with a better carbon footprint than some of what's out there. We look at it as cheaper than and easier to handle kind of variability versus some of the clean tech or alternative fuel sources out there. And we look at the demand centers, and what's interesting about Golar is just sort of where they're producing and where the demand centers are versus where most of the world's supply is coming from. So what I would say is that this business has a lot of those elements now all combined. The valuation is very reasonable. The prospects for the next 3 to 4 years look really interesting. These FLNG vessels are being bid up and wanted in some of these stranded gas reserves offshore, and the market dynamic for LNG as a whole looks great. And so all of that kind of excites me here. And again, sort of why we're invested and why I'm walking through the group with this. So again, just sort of this more of a discussion on the FLNG. The other piece is, aside from it taking a while for these FLNG vessels to sort of get out there, the company made a big strategic shift. So they owned LNG carriers. They realized that FLNG is where the returns are highest for them. And so they over the last few years, they effectively exited the entire LNG carrier business, and now they're really just focused on FLNGs. As I mentioned before, this is a solution for stranded gas. The way you can think about it is they take very large, Moss carriers, so LNG carriers, and they basically build pretty much an entire liquefaction, chemical plant on board. And that then sits on top of this stranded gas reserve offshore, and it effectively extracts the gas, liquefies it, and then either through sort of pipelines or through carrier vessels, it transports that gas. The gas is transported from the FLNG, to the port. And what's again interesting here is that these are giant vessels. These are not even just the size of a football field. It's, effectively the size of an entire football stadium. As I mentioned before, they really have two vessels that I'll get into in more detail, Hilly and Gimme. And these vessels essentially have long-term leases. Gimme longer than Hilly, but Hilly is going to be moved elsewhere that I'll get into also. Like I mentioned earlier, these are long-term contracted revenue streams with base tolling and in some cases commodity upside. They are with pretty strong counterparties. And we think this is just the start of multiple more vessels sort of being delivered by Golar. And the other point to mention too is they are basically the only company that has these FLNG vessels at this size and at the cost structure they do, just given some of their design and engineering advantages versus sort of what Shell has out there.